I never thought then, in 1928, that I would be standing here in 1965. It never even occurred to me in my fondest dreams that I might have the chance to help the sons and daughters of those students and to help people like them all over this country. But now I do have that chance. And I'll let you in on a secret. I mean to use it.
Upon Johnson's ascendance to the presidency, he was approached by an advisor that updated him about the happenings regarding a year-old program designed to alleviate poverty. Johnson's response to the advisor was, "That's my kind of program. Go ahead, give it the highest priority, push ahead full tilt." This attitude summarizes Johnson's years served as president. As Johnson's aide, Joseph Califano, wrote, Johnson lived his presidency in a race against time. He could never get his programs to and through Congress fast enough. Once they were passed, we could never get them in operation as rapidly as he ordered. When it came to anything connected to civil rights, Johnson was at his most demanding. He knew it was essential to arouse the oppressed, and that once aroused, the clock ticked impatiently. I began to grasp how acutely Johnson feared that the reforms to which he had dedicated his presidency were in mortal danger, not only for those who opposed, but for those he was trying to help. From the outset of his presidency, Johnson made it clear to the nation that his goal was to alleviate the poverty that plagued the nation, and that one of the key weapons he would use to combat poverty would be education. 5 days after President Kennedy's assassination, Johnson would address Congress saying no memorial oration or eulogy could be more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill. We have talked long in this country about equal rights. We have talked for 100 years or more. It is time now to write the next chapter and to write in the books of law. During the same address, Johnson talked about using federal aid to education to overcome racial and economic inequality. In his first State of the Union address, Johnson made the famous and symbolic announcement,
"And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America."
Johnson was confident that his experiences in Washington would enhance his ability to be an effective ruler and to accomplish his legislative goals. Speaking to his speechwriter Richard Goodwin, Johnson proclaimed, "I love Jack Kennedy, just like you, but he never really understood the Congress. I do. And I'm going to pass all those bills you cared about. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you, for me, for the country. I'm going to get my war on poverty. Of course we can't have it all in one goal. We'll have to make some concessions, make a few compromises. That's the only way to get anything. But that's this year. I have to get elected, and I don't want to scare people off. Next year we'll do even more, and the year after, until we have all of the programs." Despite Johnson's claims that he would proceed cautiously before the 1964 election, he was still robust in both his rhetoric and legislative proposals. He gave his acclaimed Great Society speech in Ann Arbor in May and quickly followed this up by signing the long-awaited Civil Rights Act into law in July. This act made any form of discrimination based on race, color, national origin, creed, and sex and employment practices and public accommodations illegal. The Civil Rights Act was praised by supporters and applauded by a large majority of Americans. The popularity of the law helped him to win a landslide victory in 1964, giving him liberal majorities in both houses of Congress and a mandate to implement his war on poverty. By carrying 44 states and over 61% of the vote, Johnson could claim to be executing the will of the American people while aggressively pursuing his legislative agenda. Following his own election to the presidency, Johnson quickly turned his attention to the education as a means to combat poverty. Johnson spoke about education as an equalizer in a commencement speech at the prominent African American College of Howard University.
To speak at this important and this historic institution. Howard has long been an outstanding center for the education of Negro Americans. Its students are of every race and color, and they come from many countries of the world. It is truly a working example of democratic excellence.
Johnson also delivered a special message to Congress in January of 1965 regarding education and his proposals to alleviate economic inequality in American classrooms. In this message, he requested that Congress appropriate $1.5 billion to education, the majority of which would be dispersed to elementary and secondary schools in districts combating high poverty rates. As president, Johnson had the opportunity to address the problems of poverty that he had witnessed throughout his life. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 embodied Johnson's ideal of combating the effects of poverty by expanding the role of the federal government to assist in the welfare of citizens. Johnson was an active supporter of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, and through his Great Society he proposed to bring about a second coming of the New Deal principles. The context of the time necessitated the need for reform. From 1940 to 1965, the number of students in elementary and secondary schools increased by 89.8%, with the high school population more than doubling. This influx of students was initiated by the baby boom generation. As the population as a whole rose, the amount of children suffering from poverty in ill-equipped schools also increased. Johnson's core intention in promoting ESEA was to provide federal funds to assist disadvantaged children and to promote equal education regardless of social class. Randall Bennett Woods writes that the ESEA was a historic piece of legislation and of monumental importance to the nation. Education took its place alongside national defense as an overriding concern of the federal government. The magnitude of federal funds provided to schools was unprecedented, as nearly every county in the United States received at least some aid. Rather than providing aid directly to students, funds were given to needy school districts. This legislation marked the first time that the distinction of poverty was used to provide categorical aid for education. The funds were designed to be used by the school boards to balance the deficiencies in neighborhood wealth. ESEA was an attempt by Lyndon Johnson to assist the poverty-stricken and improve the schools, such as the ones he himself attended and where he taught.
In addition to ESEA, Johnson tried to strike at the heart of poverty through Project Head Start. Johnson firmly believed that poverty could be curtailed through schooling, but saw that impoverished children were disadvantaged upon their entry into schools, as only 1/3 of all 3 through 5-year-olds in the country attended nursery school or kindergarten. He believed Head Start would prepare children to enter school with basic knowledge and in the proper physical condition to promote learning. As president, Johnson knew that all parents did not actively promote home learning and that some were unequipped to prepare their children for school. He feared that without active government involvement, the children of the poor would be condemned to life that historians Woolley and Peters refer to as the road to despair, the road to that wasteland of ignorance in which the children of the poor grow up to become the parents of the poor. President Johnson saw early childhood development as essential to becoming a productive and prosperous student and adult. Project Head Start was founded in an effort to promote equality by preparing underprivileged children to enter school with an equal chance to succeed. The bill was signed into law in May of 1965 and was based in the Office of Economic Opportunity. Federal aid was given out on a massive scale to both impoverished rural and city areas, as projects were developed in 261 of the nation's poorest 300 counties. Introducing the initiative, Johnson said that it was designed to make certain that poverty's children would not forevermore be poverty's captives. It was a comprehensive piece of legislation that attacked poverty on several fronts. While the bill was primarily designed to help preschool-age children enter classrooms with adequate skills, it also recognized that learning requires good health and proper parenting. The bill went beyond simply offering scholastic aid and placed extra focus on offering necessary medical and social services. Speaking of the aims of the legislation, Johnson said, "These children will receive preschool training to prepare them for regular school in September. They will get medical and dental attention that they badly need, and parents will receive counseling on improving the home environment." Johnson believed this multifaceted approach could stem poverty from the onset of life. Head Start attempted to alleviate impoverished children's struggles in school by reducing early childhood inequalities. Johnson also saw providing federal funding for students to attend post-secondary schools as vital, and therefore he proposed the Higher Education Act of 1965. Johnson's chief objective in promoting the Higher Education Act of 1965 was to make college accessible to all students based on their scholastic abilities. The bill included funding to colleges to enhance their facilities and improve their faculty, and also to establish programs centered on poverty and other areas of public concern. However, the core of the bill focused on helping individual students by providing scholarship opportunities, low-interest loans, and work opportunities to help students earn their way through school. Describing the bill, Johnson vowed, "The legislation passed by this Congress will swing open a door for young people of America. For them and for this entire land of ours, it is the most important door that will ever open, the door to education. And this legislation is the key which unlocks it." He saw education as the most viable means to break away from poverty and aggressively proposed federal aid to allow impoverished students to pursue higher education. He believed that the legislation signified a promise to all students that the leadership of their country believes in the obligation of their nation to provide and permit and assist every child born to receive all the education that he can take. To make sure this promise came to fruition, he proposed that this aid be dispersed on a massive scale. and by 1970, a quarter of all college students were receiving aid connected to the bill. President Johnson attempted to open higher education to all classes of students by offering federal aid through the Higher Education Act of 1965.
Do something we can be proud of. Help the weak and the meek and lift them up and help them train and give them an education where they can make their own way instead of having to live off the bounty of our generosity.
Clearly, Johnson saw education as a means of escape from poverty and wanted to extend equal educational opportunities to all Americans. With the help of an active Congress, Johnson was able to pass a phenomenal 69% of his legislative proposals during the 89th Congress. Johnson's program set an unprecedented standard of government involvement in education. As Lawson Bowling writes, Johnson well understood that once the principle of federal aid to K-12 education was established, there would be no turning back, despite loose talk of conservative trends in future years.